You go first.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's Facebook Leadership Lunch Chat with Jen and myself. And we're looking forward to another fun conversation and always love your feedback as we go through our chat. And we've got a number of things on our minds this week. And the first thing that you talked about, Jen, was the McKinsey study on preparing life post-COVID. So
Yeah.
I'd love to give some background on that.
Yeah, and maybe Emily can put it in the feed if she's listening. Otherwise, we'll put it in the feed after this. So the link to the study is what I'm saying. I'm not going to get the title right. I read it last night, late night, and it's a study that McKinsey did. They studied 800 executives around the country and asked them, what are your big strategies and plans to prepare your organization for post-COVID living. So it wasn't so much like, what are you trying to do right this minute for right now, but what are you picturing in the future, and what are you going to be investing in to get ready for it? And there were a lot of things, and some of them are sort of like, more remote work, things like that. But the section of the report that drew me and I really spent some time with, and I really would like the graph. Like I have to figure out if we would be allowed to use the graph with attribution, because it's really a cool picture. Mm-hmm. Is the area that one of the big areas that emerged was from the 800 was digitization, and they're spending a lot of money on digitization, and this idea that they're going to digitize their customer service delivery processes, or they're going to digitize their internal processes, or they're going to digitize their employee talent management processes, and it sort of said the percentage of which of the businesses were going to invest where. And of course, the biggest investment looked like it was in the employee area, and that's of course remote work and preparing for how we're going to have more digital collaboration, because we might not have as much physicality as we used to have. But I just loved the study and the idea and the conversation called, where are you investing to prepare for the future, which I always get in, that always hooks me like a fish. I get right in and read it because I love the future. I love the idea of what's going to be out there and how we can prepare. So anyway, I think it's worth a read. And digitization. I mean, we talk about technology, we talk about its importance. I just had a situation yesterday. I talked to a COO. We had a great call. I loved it. But one of the sad things is that they lost their CIO a while back, and he was one of the best in the profession. Honestly, just such a forward thinker. And we were talking about whether or not the partners realized what a loss that was. And one of the the things I said was, I felt like in most firms, half the partners are like, wow, technology, we really need forward thinkers. We really need strategic planners. We really need a strategic approach, and we really need to invest. This needs to be a big, big boulder on our long range strategy for a long, long time, maybe forever. Mm-hmm. And the other half are like, IT, that's just the network. We just get another guy to do it. Like their whole perspective of technology is so tactical and I don't know, behind the scenes or something.
Right.
You don't understand how it is completely wrapped up in service delivery to clients, in the sales and marketing process, and the way that your clients experience you as prospects. That technology pervades every single aspect of the business anymore. And if you don't have a really bright strategist and innovation team, and every service line and every operational part of the business ought to have technology digitization strategies. And how are we going to get to that? And I just, when I read it, it was just more affirmation, but it always worries me that people just aren't really seeing it as the strategic enabler that it really is.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple things around that if you sometimes that can sound like it's a big company thing.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Even if you are a small company, it's important to outsource this. So that there's someone thinking about this for your business.
For sure.
And there are consultants and integrators that this is what they do full time to help with these types of strategies. And
you're one of those, aren't you?
Yeah. And and many people,
I know, I just want to make it clear that you're one of them. That's all.
But, really thinking through your strategy of how you put the technology in place so that you're not duplicating technology too, because sometimes you can make it more stressful than better, because you're just throwing things in and people work in silos for the things that they need to do versus thinking of it from a global perspective and then have a very efficient way to do it. So getting the right expertise is possible no matter what size the firm is and business. The other thing I would just say is this is the positive of COVID, that this has moved forward so much faster in this area, that as consultants and technologists and thought leaders, that we've been talking about this for, I don't know how long, Jen, probably 15 years.
Longer, sadly.
I mean, we were at AICPA Prac, well, when it was tech, before it was Practech, and then before Engage, talking about this to CIOs of companies, of the cloud's coming, and then more and more people have come along. But what's happened, is that early adopters ended up, like, if they couldn't get it done in their firm, they went and did it outside and started their own practices because they could move it faster.
Right.
And now what this is doing is pushing the profession forward, of saying, like, you don't have a choice now. This really has to happen. And I think kind of the awesome things that I'm hearing is, number one, it's allowing people to do things that they had dreamed of doing, but never had the time to step back and think about doing for themselves, as far as their careers and businesses and so forth, or even starting new businesses in these areas. And number two, I've talked to a number of partners that are like, I would never go back working the way I was working before. Like, I'm liking this. Yes. And so how can you move it faster, better, stronger, through the channels now that the opportunity has presented itself, and not feel like you have to do it alone?
Right. Well, and I have a couple thoughts. And one is, the other thing about this, you're right, it scales. So I don't care if you're a sole practitioner, proprietor, or a big firm, digitization is important. Mm-hmm. And I could be a sole practitioner and implementing my own client portal for safe data transfer. That's digitization, and it gets your clients do it yourself. And that's important to them, right? So it doesn't have to be some, digitization is a weird word because it sounds mammoth and expensive or something, but it isn't that hard, right. Especially with cloud. I mean, cloud changed the game, though, in terms of cost. Back in the olden days, we did have to have a network administrator. We had to buy a server, and we had to buy software, and we had to pay for upgrades, and it was expensive, man. I mean, you paid thousands for software. Now we just pay a user fee every month or something. I mean, it's so much more relatable and accessible than it was. So I agree with you 100%. Don't be thinking about this like this is a big company conversation we're having. The second thing is, it is ridiculous to think you're going to do too much at once. So you do have to be careful. And part of this idea that you had where, like, we implement the same technology duplicatively, maybe from different vendors in two different silos, mm-hmm. because no one's talking to each other. That's really a matter of too many initiatives at once, and not enough central discussion. But, you only need to pick one or two things that you're going to tackle in the next 12 months on the digital side. Yes, maybe you could get 5 done, and maybe you should, but start with 1 or 2, and just get going on them if you haven't already. And I would tell you that for a lot of firms, it's a little bit less about their own infrastructure right now, right this second. And it's more about, how can I get my clients more digital so I can serve them more digitally? Mm-hmm. And that's the big gap that I found in COVID. I spent my whole career saying, get ready for remote client service and remote talent management. My whole career. And I never said, by the way, get your clients ready for the same thing, which is kind of a miss. So, it is. And so that would be one place I would spend some time, is getting clients ready to, to share files with you, to do video with you, and by the way, not just with you for client service, but with their customers and clients. Because if they don't figure this out for their own business model, they're not going to be in business or thriving very long. For many of them, not all of them, but many of them, they need to digitize. So there's this huge green field, Amy, of not IT consulting where I'm implementing the technology, but trusted business advisor consulting, where I'm guiding the executive committee or the board or the C-suite or just the small business owner that I serve, and I'm sitting them down and saying, hey, what are your technology plans? Yeah. And I'm trying to figure out, where are they?
Yeah. Well, and I think there's an adjacent issue that happens with duplicated technology, and it happens out of not any bad player. It actually comes from a good place, is that people feel like things aren't being solved for the client or for what they're doing. So they just go out and get something.
Yeah.
And then you start having all these different systems happening in the business because someone felt like they weren't being heard, or they feel overworked.
Yes.
They're trying to find a solution to that problem, and they're not being empowered, by the organization to get their feedback up. So it's really important when you're going through this process that you are bringing everyone along with you, taking in their feedback, understanding from their perspective. When we do it from a leadership perspective only, it is at a 30,000, 40,000 feet level instead of 10,000 feet or lower. When there's people that are working in that technology, working with clients, customers every single day, that can really tell you what's happening.
For sure.
And so it's important to balance that and not try to pretend that's not happening, because I can probably say, I'll say 99.9% of the organizations that I work with, it's happening, because they're not brought into the right conversations when needed. And then you're spending money you don't even realize, or there's so many inefficiencies happening, or people stressed out because of it.
Well, and then all this duplication irritates the heck out of the rest of the team.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, brother, doesn't management even know what we have already?
Right.
What do you mean you're introducing another solution to that? We already have one, or whatever. And there's, then you have water cooler churn and all that business that sort of derails the efficiency of implementation. You and I were talking before we started live, so I'll bring it up. We certainly have said it before, and we will keep saying it, that it's so important that leadership embarks regularly on listening tours. Mm-hmm. And this idea that, like, I have an idea as a leader, but I really can't just go off and implement it without getting some input from the troops, if you will. We need to know, like, hey, we're thinking about implementing this, web-based shopping cart technology for our clients. And we know each of you has these, side portals and web, apps that you're managing. Is anybody doing anything with shopping cart? Does anybody have anything going on there, or have any input to this process? And how many of you would use something like this, and who would like to be involved in the design of this thing? Mm-hmm. And so often we just miss that step. We handpick our own people. We don't tell people what we're thinking of doing. We don't ask for input or ideas. We don't let people who've been sneaking around with their covert, personal solution, confess their personal solution. We don't invite it and say, we know you might already have one. So they have to keep staying covert. And then we end up not having the best end solution because we didn't get enough input. We didn't get the right people involved. So and that's not just with technology, that's with everything.
Right.
Everything. HR programs, I see it all the time. HR from top down tries to implement a brand new program, and a division, department, group or person already has a process for that, and is really maybe almost a best in class sort of approach to it, and we don't involve them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
So anyway, those are mistakes, and I think we could probably talk technology all the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
But I mean, the people side of it is what gets in the way of it, and what creates the issues, right? So you can't push that aside. And when you hear the chatter, like what I'll hear a lot of times is leadership complaining about the chatter, well, we hear them complaining about it, or, or they don't want to use it, that sort of thing. Well, if you hear it, there's something there, and it probably goes a little bit deeper than the conversation itself. Like, I remember when I was a CPA firm partner, and it wasn't so much about technology, but I would be out all day at clients, and then I'd get home, the kids were young, and, take care of them, eat dinner. And then I'd get back on my computer at 8:00 and work till 11. And so that was when I got my work done and answered emails and so forth. And then I'm in a staff meeting, and I kind of hear some staff over to the side talking about the 8 p.m. emails. And I'm like, wait, are they talking about me? And so I went over to them and said, are you talking about the emails I sent? And they were like, yeah. And I'm like, you don't have to respond. It's just the time of day I can get to it. And that was kind of a learning moment for me of, what can I do to not bother them at that time when I need to get my work done? And now with technology, when you notice, you hear the rumblings, there's something to it, right? Like anything, but that's like a small example where, you're invading their family life or whatever. And then because you're a leader, they feel stressed that they need to respond, even if that's not your intention. So now, you can do draft emails, you can schedule emails in the morning. I would just sit there and wait to send them after that till the morning.
Yes.
You didn't need to go that second, but it is being cognizant of people's experience so that you can be successful with the processes, procedures, technology you put in place.
Yeah. Well, and a couple thoughts, because I'm a night owl. So your process of working is my normal business process every day is nighttime work. And, what I have to do is set up with my team. I don't need a response unless I put it in the subject, need response tonight. And and we don't use email as breakthrough technology. We use text, so we just have agreement. The text is what would be like, oh my gosh, I need you. But otherwise I'm just working, and because we're working 24/7, my partner, Renee, and I, sometimes she'll be starting work on the East Coast because she's like sometimes at 4 a.m. starter, her time, and I might be going to bed, and we'll like pass a baton sometimes because it'll be 3 a.m. my time, and I just did 5 really good hours of writing and processing, and that's a weird thing, but I do that. I like that. So that being clear on expectations there is important, so your team just knows. But the other thing is that this idea of rumbling. I think a change is well implemented when the people who implemented it can create an FAQ of all the common objections, questions, and issues, the complaints, and they have a response to them.
Yes.
And most of the time we don't, and we can't. We can't list the complaints, and we don't have good responses, and it's because we didn't socialize this thing well enough before we launched. Because if you do a good job socializing it, you'll know where the change resistance lies, where the problems lie, where the complications lie, where the inconveniences lie for the people that are having to go through the implementation. And you should be able to address those in an FAQ. And that reduces water cooler complaining. Not because it makes it any easier.
And even if you're not going to change anything, it's the response people want to hear. They just want to know why. There's a bigger thing at play, and so many different from a higher level things that you're considering that people in their silo or job don't understand. So as long as you explain it, that can kind of dissipate it, right?
Exactly.
It's just over communication.
They want to know you thought of it. Yeah. They want to know you heard it already. They want to know that this thing that they've run into isn't like the first time you're hearing it.
Mhm.
And you're never going to have that perfectly or pristinely. You will have some first time uh-ohs, but a well socialized change management implementation in any size firm is one where I already sort of evaluated the negatives.
Yes.
And I faced them. And we as a group, if we're a committee doing it, agreed that the negatives did not outweigh the positives, and we were going to create workaround strategies or answers for these negatives. And people that bump into them and hear the answer, they usually are like, all right, I get it. And I'm glad you heard of it because it makes me believe that you actually did a better job on this implementation than I thought you did.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that sometimes, we just are so half cocked when we go out and implement, and so dictatorial or something, and so secretive, and I don't even know what else, but none of that creates buy-in.
Well, and the other thing is being really good about following KPIs of the implementation. So when there's an expectation when technology comes in that it's going to be 100% better, and that never happens. You're looking for maybe 75, 80% better. And there's always going to be 20% workarounds or things you have to do that but if it's 80% better than what you were doing before, then you put a right solution in. But agreeing on what are those things that you're trying to get better, and still what open items there are as far as communication is really important when things get put in place like this.
For sure.
And I know we're running out of time again.
Yeah, so. I know. I was going to say one more thought on that, though. In change management, it's always awesome if you can list, here's what's going to be better. Those are those KPIs you're talking about, the improvement. And here's what's going to stay the same.
Yes.
And here's what might be worse.
Yeah.
I think that people really respect the change leader when they can be transparent and clear on those things. People will be like, all right, I get it. It's not going to be perfect. But there are these things that will be better, and that's what I'm going to be seeking.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're out of time, and we did one subject. We had a list of 10, but we did one. Anyway,
yes.
Super glad to spend this Friday with you all.
Yeah, very good to have this conversation and see everyone again on Friday. So we will be back next week. Have a great weekend.
Okay, see y'all.